It's October 1st, 331 BCE. The dust of the Mesopotamian plain chokes the air as two of history's greatest armies face each other across a blood-soaked battlefield. On one side stands Darius III, the King of Kings, ruler of the vast Persian Empire that stretches from India to Egypt, an empire that has dominated the known world for over 2 centuries. On the other side, atop his legendary warhorse Bucephalus, sits a 25-year-old Macedonian king who shouldn't even be here. By all logic, this young man from a small mountainous kingdom on the edge of the Greek world should have been crushed long ago by Persian gold and Persian steel. But as the morning sun rises over Gaugamela, Alexander of Macedon is about to do the impossible once again. In a few hours, he will destroy the greatest empire the world has ever known and earn a title that will echo through eternity. Alexander the Great. But how does a boy from Macedonia, a kingdom most Greeks considered barely civilized, become the conqueror of the known world? How does someone who dies before his 33rd birthday create an empire stretching from Greece to India, founding cities that still bear his name and spreading a culture that would influence the world for 1,000 years? Today we'll uncover the extraordinary story of how Alexander earned his legendary title. We'll explore the boy who was tutored by Aristotle, the teenager who tamed an untamable horse, the young king who inherited a small kingdom and transformed it into the largest empire in human history. This is the story of ambition without limits, genius without restraint, and a man who believed he was destined to rule the world. Alexander was born in 356 BCE in Pella, the capital of Macedonia, to parents who were extraordinary even by royal standards. His father, Philip II, was transforming Macedonia from a collection of feuding tribes into the most formidable military power in Greece. His mother, Olympias of Epirus, was a princess who claimed descent from Achilles and practiced the mysterious rites of Dionysus. The marriage was political, but it was also passionate and volatile. Philip and Olympias fought like titans, their palace echoing with screams and reconciliations. In this atmosphere of ambition, violence, and divine pretension, Alexander learned his first lessons about power. When Alexander was 12, a horse dealer brought Philip a magnificent but apparently untamable stallion. The horse, named Bucephalus, reared and struck at anyone who approached. Philip's horsemen declared it worthless, but young Alexander had been watching carefully. He noticed that the horse was afraid of its own shadow. Walking calmly to the animal, Alexander turned it toward the sun so it couldn't see its shadow, then leaped onto its back. The horse that no grown warrior could mount accepted the boy immediately. Philip, watching in amazement, reportedly said, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." It was prophecy disguised as praise. At 13, Alexander was sent to study under Aristotle, the greatest philosopher of the age. For 3 years, in the quiet sanctuary of Mieza, the future conqueror learned logic, ethics, politics, and medicine. Aristotle instilled in him a love of learning and a belief in the superiority of Greek culture that would later drive his mission to civilize the world. But Aristotle also taught him about the natural world, geography, and the customs of distant peoples. When Alexander later stood before the Hindu Kush mountains or negotiated with Indian princes, he drew upon knowledge gained in those classroom discussions with his famous tutor. At 16, while Philip campaigned in Thrace, Alexander was left as regent of Macedonia. When a Thracian tribe rebelled, the teenager didn't wait for his father's return. He gathered an army, marched north, crushed the rebellion, and founded his first city, Alexandropolis. At an age when most princes were still learning to use a sword, Alexander was already proving he could command armies and build empires. In 338 BCE, at the Battle of Chaeronea, 18-year-old Alexander commanded the Macedonian cavalry that destroyed the elite sacred band of Thebes, 300 warriors who had never been defeated. The victory made Macedonia the master of Greece, but it also set the stage for tragedy. 2 years later, at his daughter's wedding celebration, Philip II was assassinated by his own bodyguard. As chaos erupted around the royal court, 20-year-old Alexander moved with lightning speed to secure the throne. The boy who had tamed Bucephalus was now king of Macedonia, and the world would never be the same. Philip's assassination threw Macedonia into crisis. Other claimants emerged to challenge Alexander's succession. Rival kingdoms saw opportunity in Macedonia's apparent weakness, and Greek city-states that had submitted to Philip began planning rebellion. The young king faced enemies on all sides and skeptics within his own court. But those who underestimated Alexander were about to learn a harsh lesson about Macedonian resolve. Alexander's first move was to eliminate internal threats with surgical precision. He executed potential rivals, secured the loyalty of the army through generous bonuses, and demonstrated that despite his youth, he possessed his father's political cunning and his mother's ruthless determination. When the army assembly confirmed him as king, Alexander reportedly declared, "I have inherited from my father not just a kingdom, but the conquest of the world." It sounded like the boasting of an inexperienced youth. Within a decade, it would sound like prophecy. News of Philip's death had spread quickly through Greece, and several city-states led by Thebes declared their independence from Macedonian hegemony. They had gravely miscalculated. Alexander marched south with 30,000 men, moving so fast that he appeared at the gates of Thebes before the city's leaders even knew he had left Macedonia. What happened next would echo throughout Alexander's career. Rather than simply reassert Macedonian control, Alexander made an example that would terrify all of Greece. In 335 BCE, he ordered the complete destruction of Thebes. The city was razed to the ground, its 30,000 inhabitants killed or sold into slavery. Only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar were spared. The message was clear: submission to Macedonia was not optional. With Greece subdued, Alexander turned north to secure Macedonia's borders. He led lightning campaigns against the Triballi and Illyrians, demonstrating the military innovations his father had developed. The Macedonian phalanx, with its 18-foot sarissas, spears, proved unstoppable against traditional tribal warfare. But these campaigns were more than military exercises. They were Alexander's finishing school in the art of war. Each battle taught him lessons he would later use against the Persian Empire: the importance of logistics, the value of local intelligence, the psychology of warfare, and the crucial timing of the decisive charge. As Alexander prepared for his ultimate challenge, the invasion of Persia, he encountered the legendary Gordian knot in the city of Gordium. According to prophecy, whoever could untie the impossibly complex knot would rule all of Asia. Alexander examined the knot briefly, then drew his sword and cut it in half. "It makes no difference how it's untied," he declared. This moment encapsulates Alexander's approach to seemingly impossible challenges. When conventional methods failed, he created new ones. It was a mindset that would serve him well in the campaigns to come. In the spring of 334 BCE, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia with 35,000 men, a relatively small force to challenge an empire of 50 million people. But this wasn't just a military expedition. It was a crusade to spread Greek civilization and avenge centuries of Persian invasions of Greece. Alexander's first act upon landing was to throw a spear into Asian soil and claim the continent as Spear-Won territory. Then he made a pilgrimage to Troy, where he honored his hero Achilles and reportedly declared that Achilles was fortunate to have Homer to immortalize his deeds. Alexander would need no poet. His deeds would speak for themselves. Alexander's first major test came at the Granicus River, where a Persian army waited to throw the invaders back into the sea. The Persians had chosen their position well. The riverbank was steep and muddy, perfect for stopping a cavalry charge. Alexander's generals advised caution, perhaps waiting for better conditions. Alexander's response was characteristic. "I would be ashamed if, after crossing the Hellespont so easily, I should be stopped by a little stream like this." He led the charge personally, plunging into the river with his cavalry. In the chaos of battle, Alexander was surrounded by Persian nobles who had specifically targeted him. His helmet was split by an axe blow, and he would have died if not for the intervention of his general Clytus the Black, who saved his life by killing the Persian warrior mid-swing. The victory at Granicus opened all of Western Asia Minor to Alexander's advance. More importantly, it established a pattern. Alexander would always lead from the front, sharing every danger with his men. The fortified city of Halicarnassus presented Alexander with his first major siege. The city's defenses, strengthened by Persian engineers, seemed impregnable, but Alexander demonstrated the innovative thinking that would characterize his entire campaign. He built massive siege towers, employed battering rams, and pioneered new techniques for undermining city walls. When direct assault failed, he starved the city into submission, while maintaining perfect discipline among his troops. The siege lasted months, but when Halicarnassus finally fell, all of Asia Minor knew that no fortress could stop the Macedonian king. In November 333 BCE, Alexander faced his greatest challenge yet, a personal confrontation with Darius III, the great king of Persia himself. At Issus, a narrow plain between the mountains and the sea, Darius had assembled a massive army. Some sources claim 600,000 men, though modern historians estimate closer to 100,000. Alexander had barely 40,000, but Alexander understood something that Darius didn't. In the narrow confines of Issus, numbers mattered less than tactics. He concentrated his elite companion cavalry on the right wing and personally led a devastating charge directly at Darius's position in the center of the Persian line. The sight of the young Macedonian king, his armor gleaming, his white-plumed helmet unmistakable, charging straight toward him with murderous intent, broke Darius's nerve. The great king fled the battlefield, abandoning his army, his treasures, and even his family to Alexander's mercy. Alexander's treatment of Darius's captured family revealed another aspect of his greatness. Rather than executing or enslaving the Persian royal women, he treated them with honor and respect, earning admiration even from his enemies. This combination of military ruthlessness and political wisdom would become an Alexander trademark. The island city of Tyre presented Alexander with what seemed an impossible challenge. Located half a mile offshore with massive walls and a powerful navy, Tyre had never been taken by siege. The city's leaders were confident they could wait out any blockade. Alexander's solution was audacious beyond belief. He would build a causeway from the mainland to the island, creating a bridge where none had existed before. For 7 months, his engineers and soldiers worked under constant attack, hauling stones and timber to extend the mole day by day across the Mediterranean waters. When Tyre finally fell in 332 BCE, Alexander's reputation for making the impossible possible was sealed. The causeway still exists today, having permanently connected the island to the mainland, a lasting monument to Alexander's refusal to accept limitations. Egypt surrendered without a fight, welcoming Alexander as a liberator from Persian rule. Here, Alexander demonstrated his political genius by respecting local customs and religion. The Egyptian priests declared him the son of the god Amun-Ra, and Alexander may have begun to believe his own divine propaganda. More practically, he founded the city of Alexandria at the mouth of the Nile, a city that would become the greatest center of learning in the ancient world and one of over 70 cities he would establish bearing his name. By 331 BCE, Darius had assembled the largest army in Persian history at Gaugamela, in modern-day Iraq. This time, he chose the battlefield carefully, a vast, flat plain where his numbers and his scythed chariots could have maximum effect. Ancient sources claim he had over 1 million men, though modern estimates suggest around 250,000, still more than 5 times Alexander's force. Darius had also learned from his previous defeats. His army included Greek mercenaries who understood Macedonian tactics, Indian war elephants that the Macedonians had never faced, and scythed chariots designed to break the feared phalanx formation. Alexander spent the night before the battle studying the terrain and developing a battle plan that would become one of history's most studied military strategies. While his generals worried about being outflanked by the massive Persian army, Alexander saw opportunity in Darius's numbers. He arranged his army in an oblique formation, with his right wing angled forward and his left wing refused. As the battle began, he deliberately allowed the Persians to extend their line, trying to outflank him, creating exactly the gap he was waiting for. When the moment came, Alexander led his companion cavalry in a devastating wedge formation directly through the gap in the Persian center, heading straight for Darius himself. The psychological effect was devastating. Once again, the sight of Alexander charging directly toward him broke the Persian king's nerve. Darius fled the field for the second time, and with his retreat, the Persian Empire began its final collapse. In a single afternoon, Alexander had shattered a power that had dominated the ancient world for centuries. The victory at Gaugamela didn't just make Alexander master of Persia, it announced the arrival of a new world order. Alexander's treatment of Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire, revealed both his strategic brilliance and his capacity for theatrical gestures. After allowing his troops to plunder the city's incredible wealth, he ordered the palace complex burned, officially as revenge for the Persian destruction of Athens 150 years earlier. But the burning served a deeper purpose. It announced to the world that the old order was dead and that Alexander was not just another conqueror, but the founder of something entirely new. Most conquerors would have stopped at the conquest of Persia, but Alexander's ambitions knew no bounds. In 327 BCE, he led his armies across the Hindu Kush Mountains into India, a land of mystery to the Greeks, inhabited by peoples who fought with war elephants and whose kings claimed to rule territories larger than all of Greece. At the Hydaspes River, modern-day Jhelum in Pakistan, Alexander faced King Porus, who commanded an army that included 200 war elephants, creatures the Macedonians had never fought in such numbers. The battle that followed showcased Alexander's adaptability and tactical genius. Using a combination of feints, river crossings during a thunderstorm, and innovative anti-elephant tactics, Alexander defeated Porus despite being significantly outnumbered. But in victory, he showed the magnanimity that was becoming his trademark. He restored Porus to his throne as a client king, earning the Indian ruler's lifelong loyalty. After 8 years of constant campaigning, Alexander's veterans had reached their breaking point. At the Hyphasis River, modern Bes, his army mutinied for the first time. They had followed him to the edge of the known world, but they would go no further. Alexander's response revealed both his humanity and his superhuman ambition. He raged for 3 days in his tent, then emerged to announce that the gods had spoken through his soldiers. The campaign would end, but not before he led them down the Indus River to the sea, adding new territories to his empire even in retreat. What separated Alexander from other great military leaders was his vision of what came after conquest. He wasn't content to simply rule conquered territories, he wanted to transform them, to create a new kind of empire that blended the best of Greek and Eastern cultures. Alexander's policy of cultural fusion was revolutionary for its time. He encouraged intermarriage between his Macedonian soldiers and local women, personally marrying Roxana, a Bactrian princess, and later taking additional wives for political reasons. At Susa, he organized a mass wedding ceremony where 10,000 of his soldiers married Asian women in a single day. This wasn't just political theater, it was social engineering on an unprecedented scale. Alexander envisioned an empire where Greek reason and Eastern wisdom would combine to create a new form of civilization. Alexander proved as capable an administrator as he was a general. He maintained the efficient Persian administrative system while injecting Greek innovations. He appointed both Macedonians and Persians to govern his territories, creating a meritocracy that transcended ethnic boundaries. His cities were planned not just as military outposts, but as centers of commerce and learning. Alexandria in Egypt became the intellectual capital of the ancient world, housing the great library and attracting scholars from across the known world. Through his conquests, Alexander spread Greek language, art, philosophy, and science from the Mediterranean to Central Asia. This cultural diffusion, known as Hellenization, would influence the development of Christianity, Buddhism, and Islamic civilization centuries later. Greek became the lingua franca of the ancient world, enabling trade, diplomacy, and intellectual exchange on a scale never before seen. The cultural unity Alexander created would outlast his political empire by 1,000 years. Alexander standardized weights, measures, and coinage across his empire, creating the first truly international economy. Trade routes that had been disrupted by constant warfare were secured and expanded. Goods from India reached markets in Macedonia, while Greek artisans found customers in Bactria and Sogdiana. What made Alexander's achievements possible wasn't just his tactical genius, but his extraordinary ability to inspire absolute devotion in his followers. His soldiers didn't just obey him, they worshipped him. Veterans who had campaigned with his father said they had never seen anything like the young king's ability to motivate men to attempt the impossible. Alexander was wounded in nearly every major battle he fought, not because he was reckless, but because he believed leaders should share the dangers they asked others to face. At the siege of Mali in India, he was the first man over the enemy walls, and was nearly killed when an arrow pierced his lung. His soldiers' desperate fury at seeing their king wounded led them to massacre the entire city. Unlike many military leaders, Alexander remained intellectually curious throughout his campaigns. He traveled with philosophers, historians, scientists, and artists. When his armies reached India, he spent hours questioning local philosophers about their beliefs and practices. He founded libraries, supported scholars, and ensured that knowledge from conquered territories was preserved and disseminated. Alexander thought on a scale that dwarfed his contemporaries. While other generals planned battles, Alexander planned civilizations. He understood that lasting conquest required not just military victory, but cultural transformation. His empire endured not because of the strength of its armies, but because of the appeal of its ideas. But Alexander's greatness came with shadows. His ambition was matched by ruthlessness when necessary. He executed his own general Philotas on charges of treason, and later killed Clytus the Black, the man who had saved his life at Granicus, in a drunken rage when Clytus criticized his adoption of Persian customs. These moments reveal that Alexander's greatness wasn't moral perfection, but the ability to subordinate everything, including his own conscience, to his vision of world conquest and transformation. By 323 BCE, Alexander had conquered the known world, but he was showing signs of the immense physical and psychological toll of his campaigns. 13 years of constant warfare, numerous wounds, and the stress of ruling a vast, diverse empire were wearing down even his superhuman constitution. Even as his health declined, Alexander's ambitions continued to expand. He was planning the conquest of Arabia, expeditions to explore the Caspian Sea, and campaigns to bring the Western Mediterranean under his rule. Some sources suggest he dreamed of conquering Rome itself, and then turning his attention to India's eastern kingdoms. On June 11, 323 BCE, in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, Alexander died. He was 32 years old. The cause remains mysterious, possibly malaria, possibly poison, possibly the accumulated effects of his wounds and lifestyle. His final words, when asked who should inherit his empire, were reportedly, "To the strongest." Alexander's death triggered immediate chaos. His empire, held together by his personal charisma and vision, began fragmenting within hours of his passing. His generals, the Diadochi, carved up his territories in a series of wars that would last for decades. But while his political empire crumbled, his cultural empire endured. The Hellenistic kingdoms that emerged from Alexander's empire, the Ptolemies in Egypt, the Seleucids in Syria and Mesopotamia, the Antigonids in Macedonia, all preserved and spread Greek culture. For centuries, from Spain to Afghanistan, educated people spoke Greek, studied Greek philosophy, and admired Greek art. Alexander's conquest created the cultural conditions that would allow new religious and philosophical movements to spread. Buddhism traveled from India to the Greek kingdoms of Bactria. Greek philosophy influenced Jewish thought in Alexandria. The cosmopolitan world Alexander created would later provide the perfect environment for the spread of Christianity. The cities Alexander founded became lasting monuments to his vision. Alexandria in Egypt remained a center of learning for centuries. Bucephala, named after his beloved horse, controlled trade routes in India. Kandahar, Alexandria in Arachosia, became a crucial nexus between the Greek and Indian worlds. These cities weren't just military outposts, they were laboratories for cultural fusion, places where Greek colonists intermarried with local populations and created new forms of art, architecture, and thought. Alexander earned the title the Great through achievements that stagger the imagination even today. In 13 years, he conquered more territory than any military leader before or since. His empire stretched 3,000 miles from Greece to India, encompassing dozens of different peoples, languages, and cultures. But territorial conquest alone doesn't explain his greatness. Other conquerors, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, Caesar, won impressive victories without achieving Alexander's lasting cultural impact. Alexander revolutionized the very concept of kingship. Previous monarchs ruled through fear, tradition, or divine mandate. Alexander ruled through personal charisma, shared danger, and a vision of a better world. His soldiers followed him not because they had to, but because they believed in him and his mission. Perhaps Alexander's greatest achievement was proving that different cultures could be combined and improved, rather than simply dominated. His empire wasn't just Greek rule over conquered barbarians. It was an attempt to create something new and better by blending the best elements of all the civilizations he encountered. Alexander set the standard by which all subsequent conquerors would be measured. Julius Caesar wept when he saw a statue of Alexander, lamenting that at the same age, he had accomplished nothing. Napoleon studied Alexander's campaigns obsessively. Even today, military academies around the world analyze his tactics and strategies. Alexander's influence extended far beyond military conquest. The Greek language he spread became the language of the New Testament. The cities he founded became centers of trade and learning that shaped the ancient world. The cultural fusion he promoted created the cosmopolitan Hellenistic civilization that would bridge the gap between the classical and medieval worlds. So why do we call Alexander the Great nearly 2,400 years after his death? Not because he was perfect, he wasn't. Not because he was always virtuous, he could be cruel when it served his purposes. We call him great because he achieved the impossible, dreamed on a scale that dwarfed his contemporaries and left the world fundamentally changed. Alexander embodied the paradoxes of human greatness. He was a student of philosophy who solved problems with the sword. He was a liberator who ruled as an absolute monarch. He spread civilization through conquest and promoted peace through war. These contradictions don't diminish his greatness, they make it more human and therefore more remarkable. Alexander's life teaches us that greatness isn't about moral perfection. It's about the courage to attempt the impossible and the vision to see beyond the limitations others accept. He shows us that one person, with sufficient determination and ability, can indeed change the course of history. But perhaps Alexander's greatest lesson is about the power of ambition coupled with action. In an age when young people are often told to be realistic, to accept limitations, to lower their expectations, Alexander's life stands as a testament to what's possible when someone refuses to accept the word impossible. Alexander of Macedon became the Great, not through a single achievement, but through a lifetime of refusing to accept limitations. He took a small kingdom on the edge of the civilized world and used it to reshape human civilization itself. He proved that with sufficient vision, courage, and determination, any dream, no matter how impossible it seems, can be achieved. That is why, 2,400 years after his death, we still speak his name with awe. That is why he remains the Great. And that is why his story continues to inspire anyone who dares to dream of changing the world. In the end, Alexander didn't just conquer the world, he expanded our conception of what one human being could accomplish. That, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. Alexander the Great, student, king, conqueror, visionary, legend. The boy who tamed Bucephalus became the man who tamed the world. His empire lasted barely a decade after his death, but his legend will last forever.